everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Getting Real About Business, your favorite podcast. I think Andrea said it's your favorite the last time. Your favorite podcast, where we share with you critical things that you need to think about as a business owner if you want to take it to the next level. And so this fortnightly podcast is sponsored by Strat-fin Consulting, and we are the dynamic duo that lead Strat-fin Consulting. I am Dana Hayes Burke. I take the business strategy side of things, and we have your virtual CFO, Andrea Ragu, who is here to ensure that all things financial are considered. So we are thrilled to dive into today's episode. And without further ado, I want to pass over to Andrea so she can share with you what we're going to be discussing today.
So in today's episode, what are we talking about? Well, today we want to talk to the family-run businesses. And the topic is too late to pivot, the dilemma of family-run businesses. For many Caribbean entrepreneurs and businesses, the ultimate measure of success is really building a family-run business that could stand the test of time. Some of our region's largest and most celebrated companies today were founded 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? And they've now grown into industry giants and will become symbols of generational wealth and legacy. But there's a but. These success stories only represent a very small fraction of all the businesses, really. Maybe just 5 to 10% of the businesses have the potential to thrive across so many generations. And why is that? Why do we see that happening? Well, it's because most businesses are missing one critical element. And that missing piece is effective succession planning and a smooth transition process. So in this episode, we want to talk about some critical areas that family-run businesses, CEOs, which is often the head of these families, must focus on in order to make the strategic shift that is necessary for long-term success and survival. So we will talk about some key things like what are the common challenges that you could in passing the baton from one generation to the next. Why do some businesses fail to try to do this successfully? And we will want to leave you with what are some of the things that you can do to future-proof your business for sustained growth. So let's get into these issues so that we could uncover the strategies that separate thriving family businesses from those that fade away.
I love that. So I'm pretty sure that your interest has been piqued already, especially if you are one of those persons who is inheriting a family-run business. You have the conversations with your mom or your dad who started the business, and they say to you, Johnny, Janet, I need you to take over this business. But then you are in this situation where you're being invited to take over the business, but you don't have what you need. Or if you are, in fact, the person who's trying to pass over the business and you yourself are not certain how to release the reins of the business because, you built this from the ground up, you're invested in it. And let's be real, Andrea, I can say this, let's be real, that sometimes you just may not like the ideas that are coming to you from the child that you are passing the business over to.
Correct. I mean, that's what we're here to. We're here to be real, guys. And we know sometimes these heads of families, it could be very difficult to think about transitioning the business to the next generation. The next generation, their ideas are so much different to what you have. And you're looking at the business and you're thinking, oh my God, my business is going to not be recognizable.
It can't be
right.
It can't be done like this. And so, I mean, in my journey as a business consultant, I have worked with those kinds of businesses, and I've seen it. I've seen the struggle where you're trying to build a strat plan, or you're trying to map the way forward, and you are having these conversations with children who are taking over the business or trying to take over the business, and there is no cohesion in the thoughts or the ideas. And so this brings us to a different kind of fakery in the bakery segment today. This fakery in the bakery is not going to be so much comedy, like we had fun the last few times. Serious matters, but comedy.
But we're going to be serious with it.
This one is really going to highlight something that we saw in the media in Trinidad and Tobago, right? And so we're going to put a link in this episode description so you can go and listen to the interview directly for yourself. But regrettably, we recently discovered that Pascal's Bakery, which has been a long-standing bakery in Trinidad and Tobago, is selling their business. And I recalled that maybe about 6, 7 years ago, I had attended an event and they were really heralded for making that pivot and that shift to creating rice cakes. Because, back then, everybody was looking at all the lines, the waistline, the hemline,
Correct.
the line.
And
And
flour was the new bad word.
flour was, what is gluten? Gluten, nothing.
What is
And they really did make such a good strategic move, I think, on the surface of it, to getting into the rice cakes, that health area. And so a lot of conferences were kind of looking at them in terms of that change and that shift. And here we are about 7 years later, and you're hearing the story of how that didn't save the business. And so this now comes to our point of too late to pivot, right? And so when you listen to the interview, one of the things that the CEO pointed to was that succession planning took too long. She outrightly said it. She said, there's a challenge in the succession planning. Now, notwithstanding, and we know there are other economic factors that took place in that period of time. We know the many things that happen, but this is a real life example of when things are not put in place in the right way to get you to the next stage, not just the succession planning, but other elements, you come to the point where that business, that's your legacy, doesn't exist anymore,
does
right,
not exist
Andrea?
anymore. Absolutely. And, you know, it's a case where I think business owners, the heads of the family, that is, they can't fathom that the things that got them to the 30-year mark are not the things that will take them to the 50 and the 60-year mark,
Yeah.
right? And this is where the too late, as we said in our title, too late to pivot. You missed the opportunities, or the cues, I should say, of when you were supposed to take certain strategic shifts. You missed that opportunity, and then by the time you do you do decide to pivot, it's because it's too late to make the impact that you thought it was going to make, which is what the business owner said in the interview. The time for a strategic shift, there is a time to do it. And we said it is not a typical fakery segment, as we said, but what we want to the misconception is that I've been doing it like this for so long and it's brought me success for so long. How can it not carry me forward?
How can it not carry me forward? So I've been in fabric of society too long to fail. And because that's an
Exactly.
internal conversation that is going on in the minds of the owner, of the CEO, and because you're in the busyness of doing the business, you miss the vital cues to pivot the business. And so that's the fakery. That's a cautionary fakery for all of us who are building businesses and thinking about making a legacy business, because it's a thing that we see. How do we keep moving forward and yet still not miss the cues to pivot, right? So definitely go check that out. Check out
Yeah.
that segment, that interview that was done by the owner of this business that we've now really lost in its configuration that we knew.
Correct. So now that we've kind of shown you what can happen, Dana, tell us a bit about what is it that if a CEO is listening to this podcast, or even the successor, the second generation who knows that this business is going to come to them maybe in the next year or two, what are some of the things that we need to be thinking about in order to make that shift?
Right. So if you're taking notes, what we're going to be pointing out is some of the common challenges that we have. That particular question, challenges in passing on the baton and things that stand in the way of businesses being able to transition successfully. I'll tell you, when it comes to strategic succession planning, it is almost non-existent in most family-run businesses. So you have the dilemma of, I'm building this business to pass on to my children, but I never pass it on to my children. And so what this looks like is that the head of the family tends to keep all information about how the business is run within their own heads. And they have all the information about how this business is successful within their own heads. And quite frankly, we know what it sounds like. It sounds like, yeah, I know John and I know Jane and I know how to connect with this one. You don't worry about that. I'll do it because I know how to get them to respond. You don't need to worry about that. That's just the way we do things. Does that sound familiar? So what has been happening is for 30 years, I have a modus operandi. It's all in my head, which means that I can't translate how to get the same results to you. And by the time the CEO is ready to do that, it's at a point now where all their energy is gone. One, they're tired. They've been running this business for 40 years, for 30 years. They're exhausted. They want to pass it over to you because they're exhausted. The challenge now is they don't have all of the information because everything has been in their head. And as much as we believe our brains are fantastic, we don't hold as much as we think we hold. And more than that, they can't keep the pace anymore to run the business to transfer information to you. So here we have the dilemma of everything is in the person's head. So we can't have strategic succession planning because we don't have well documented operational processes. And so without this, you are now finding difficulty to innovate or diversify. So how do you know this is happening? I'm going to let you ask yourself some questions. Has your company ever completed a SWOT analysis for itself? What is a SWOT analysis? A review of your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Does your business, your family-run business, have any standard operational procedures for all your areas of operation? Or is it with the admin who's been with you for 20 years, the owner who's been running the business from inception, the accountant who just does your taxes, and everything is in its place in silos, but we don't actually know how we get one set of information from one place to the other. We have everything in folders. You know, those big folders with the big rings, and you just slip the invoice inside there, and you slip the letter inside there. But we don't know how to go from inquiry to the contract, for a contract to delivering the contract to the post-contract operations. No operating procedures.
Well, first of all, is there even a documented contract, or did that contract expire 10 years ago?
Yeah, Adrian, let us not go there. The episode short. We won't be able to finish. But these are
that's one example. If you're looking for something if as a business owner, you're looking for an example of if it's happening in your business, take a look at that part.
Yeah, you have long-term ongoing arrangements with somebody, but no contracts, right? Do you have a working decision-making framework so that you can maintain the quality of decisions that leads to success? Because here's one of the things I've found. A lot of family-run business, everything is subjective. Everything is filtered through the understanding of somebody. So we will not have consistency in decisions.
Nope.
And do you even thought about creating a succession protocol for your company? So which means that over time, what is the process of releasing more autonomy and authority to the person who is taking over the function? I know there's a lot of questions, but that's why this is recorded. So pause, write, and go away with it.
Absolutely. Take a pause, guys. Listen to the questions that we've just asked and ask yourself if these things are happening in your business, right? And as Dana pointed out, she mentioned a lot of the strategic succession elements. Another element that you need to think about is, let's talk about some numbers. And one of the key things one of my first questions I'm going to ask is, have you looked at your financial records beyond compliance? What do I mean by that? Are you in the habit of looking at your financial statements on a monthly basis, even on a quarterly basis? Or are we just waiting for the end of the year to pull the numbers and hand it over to the accountant for the accountant to do the tax return? And first of all, the accountant is not even in-house. That's another discussion. But, right, it's this external person that you give it to, and that person takes the information away and goes and does whatever they need to do for tax compliance. So my first question is, do you even do that as an activity? And why is that important? Is because there's a lot of information in your numbers, and there's a lot, and that is where you get data driven decisions. That is where you get data to help you make better decisions. But here are some things, once you've answered the question of have you looked at your financial records, here are the three things that I think all CEOs and business owners of family-run businesses need to check, right? Let's look at cash flow, aka also known as liquidity. And one of the things that I would encourage people to look at is, you're in business for 30 years, but in that 30 years, has your business generated any additional cash over time? Or have you just maintained the status quo? Have you just maintained your balances and maintained your obligations? Right? Over the 30 years, have you been able to set aside any extra cash, maybe in the form of a savings account somewhere, or some cases, an investment? Were you able to purchase the property that you are currently operating in? Were you able to purchase another property? Right? And I'm not talking about, well, okay, we were able to buy vehicles. That's a depreciating asset. We're not talking about that, but we're talking about, were you able to take any excess cash that you've developed over the years and done something so that it works for you in the next 20 to 30 years, right? So you want to ask yourself questions about your cash flow. The other thing in cash flow that you want to actually look at as well is, are you heavily reliant on your overdraft facility? Now, you've been around for 30 years, which means you have an excellent relationship with your bankers, right? You've been around for 30 years. You're probably considered one of their own legacy customers. If a bank has been in operation 50 years in Trinidad and Tobago, and you've been their customer for 30 or 35 out of that 50, you're a good customer, right? But with that, are you heavily reliant on your overdraft facility to the point where you can't operate without it? I have seen businesses where, legacy businesses that have been around for a long time, that they can't operate if they don't have the facility, if they don't have an overdraft facility. And that's a big red flag, right? Because over 30 years, 40 years says something about stability, and it says something about your ability to continue. But if you've reached the point where, well, I can't operate if I don't have my overdraft, then it means, I go back to my point number one, you're not generating any additional cash, right? You're just maintaining a status quo.
And isn't it not that a lot of the times you're able to keep that overdraft facility because there's a relationship with the owner who is now transitioning out? So
Correct.
another consideration, the soft side of that hard conversation is that, will they have the same amount of confidence in the son or the daughter that you are giving the business over to if certain financial things are not
Absolutely.
saying?
Absolutely. So you've gotten it, you've gotten the facility, you've had it all these years, but it has now become this thing that it's built on relationships now, right? So cash flow is a big element of looking at your financials, as in terms of what do you need to look at as you are making this shift, right? You also want to look at, over time, let's talk about some profitability elements. Now, this could be an absolute measure in that you could say, let's look at your financial statements. Oh, and see how I'm linking it back. My very first point, I asked, are you using your financial statements, right? If you're not using the financial statements, then you probably don't know the figure I'm about to talk about. But you could look at your profitability in terms of absolute terms over the last maybe 10 years. Has that figure, profit after tax, has it been increasing or has it been decreasing over time, right? Or have you been looking at your margins? And if you're a business that's been around for 30 years, you are supposed to know what a profit margin is, right? We're not speaking to newbies here, but take a look at your margins over time. Have you been, how has that been performing, right? Because why am I talking about profitability? Because the ability to generate profit lends to the desirability of your company overall, for even as an investment, right? For you to get investment in your company. Remember, we're talking about making strategic shifts, and making a strategic shift may require additional investment. Profitability is one of those things that makes you desirable to somebody on the outside wanting to come in. If you're in operations for 30 years, you should have that ability to be attractive, right? And then the last thing, and as we talk about finances, is let's talk about efficiency. The older a company is, the more easy it is to be inefficient. And it goes right back to what Dana was saying when she talked about her, that handing over and succession planning, lack of no operational policies and procedures in place. Everything is existing in the owner's head. So you find things are just not being done in a structured way. And many times the operations that you started with, many times that's not what is going to take you to the next situation. And it's very easy to become inefficient. And it's easy to become inefficient because as a growing business, you've probably doubled or tripled your initial staff levels from when you started. 30 years is a long time, right? And you could have doubled your employees and therefore doubled, in theory, doubled your capacity. But that doesn't mean that you double the revenue. So this is where inefficiency comes in. You're growing the business in that you're hiring more people, hiring more staff, but they're not generating the amount of revenue, that the amount of sales that they should be generating. So this leads to an overall inefficient operation over time. And a lot of money is going into just running the operations and not growing the operations and maintaining the status quo. And that could lead you to be inefficient at a financial level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. So I'm hoping that you're seeing that there's a progression, right? So there's need. I feel like I want to say this before I get into the final aspect of it, right? I want to say that I think a lot of the times as well, the struggle with the succession planning and the passing of the baton is also happening because the finances are not in order. So what am I passing over? Just saying, there's a little fear around that, right? And then you also have, so when you have the passing over of the baton, but we are not sure what we really passing over because we never did the business health from a financial perspective, because that's what Andrew is looking at, the business health. Then how then, if I've passed over the baton, I'm trying to, how can I now grow and diversify? Because the truth is, to get back to our case that we look at in the bakery segment, which really that's what it is a case. Growing the business in these times will require you to employ some smart growth and diversification strategy and tactics, because it's different the times that we are living in. It is just different. There was a greater probability of strong growth in a business 30 years ago because we didn't have a lot. We weren't exposed to as much. The world was not so interconnected. Globalization was a concept that we spoke about but very rarely experienced in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean. That's just the reality. When I learned about globalization when I was in high school, we spoke about it as a concept, but was not a concept that we felt daily in our lives.
Correct.
Now we feel the impact daily in our lives. I always talk about the closing of the gap between an international affair and a local consequence. So back when we had wars long ago, we knew it was happening, but we did not feel it for about 5 years. Now there is a war today, we feel it in a month because the supply chain has been completely decimated towards our region. So sharing that now, we have smart growth and diversification that we have to think about. So it means that as a CEO, you need to start thinking about the strategic shifts you need to make in order to diversify your income earning opportunities. So this is piggybacking on what Andrea has just shared with you regarding the accounts. How have you diversified the way that you are investing your money, the way that you are working your money so that you can now build a successful company? Because for a lot of you at 30 years, you've reached the cap. You have hit the growth stage and you're now at the plateau stage. Like, this is if you're at the plateau stage for 10 years, next up is decline for your product.
Next up is decline. Exactly.
And so most of the companies that survive, let's go to the 5 to 10% that Andrew spoke about before. Most of them, the reason that they're able to build these legacy businesses that they have chosen, they have looked at their business health, identified opportunities in their cash flow, and have diversified outside of their core business. So you'll see a furniture store moving into property management. But you might not really know it's happening because it's happening in the back end. It's not in the
In the
front
back
of
end.
their business.
And it's happening with the surplus cash that I identified when I spoke about the finances, that ability to generate surplus cash. So it could look very simply like owning where you operate, and then subleasing. So you come now, you're in the real estate space.
So it ensures that your everything is growing, right? And so just to give you some quick examples, not to say that you need to replicate these models, but we do know it has happened. Answer did it. Answer McCall Group in Trinidad and Tobago did it. They started off in trading and distribution. Now they're in financial services, they're in media, they're in manufacturing, they're in retail, right? And their financial services, they just got into banking, right? So let's look at that. We have in Barbados, you have Williams Industries, started off manufacturing an electrical firm. Now they went into construction. They are maximizing the times. They're in waste recycling. They're in desalination. They're in real estate development. So again, it's pointing out these firms are examples and cases within our region, but they are not the only ones who can do it. Other businesses are doing it on a smaller level, less visible, and that's how they're surviving. So you now, as you are transitioning your business, as you are taking over the business, these are things that you need to look at, that you might not be able to necessarily grow and gain new market share in your core business, but you have to do the business health check in order to see opportunities to start making your money work for you, because that is where the CEO moves really take place. And so now this is bringing us to our final segment, which we wouldn't be who we are if we didn't tell you what to go away and do. So we're going from hustler to CEO. So with that, I want to pass over to Andrea because I think we want to start with finance first before we go into the other area.
Yes. So family-run businesses, here's your first order of business in order for you to make those CEO moves. Financial audit. What do we mean by financial audit? Well, the three areas that I spoke about, looking at your cash flow or your liquidity, looking at your profitability, and looking at your efficiency, right? Each one of these areas, there are certain measurements that you can do to get what we call ratios, for you to get that specific number, for you to know the health. We're not going to get into the details of it in this specific segment here, but I encourage you to have a conversation with your accountant. Get your numbers and run through your numbers looking under these three core areas. How liquid are you, and what has been your cash flow situation over the last 5 to 10 years, right? Have you been generating any additional cash, or have you just been maintaining? Right? Look at your profitability. Has your profitability been growing, or have you been stagnant, or has it been on the decline? If you have constantly have low profitability, it could mean something is happening on the inside where too much money is going into operations and not enough is being generated as profit. So you want to look at your efficiency levels to see how your money is being spent. So that's the financial audit perspective.
Right. And so I'm going to jump in now on the business strategy side, and it's time for you to do a business strategy review. And so key things that I want you to look at. The first thing that I want you to do is a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. If you don't have the capacity to do that, get a consultant, like Strat-fin Consulting if you want, to help you to get into reviewing your business strategy and your business positioning. So you want to do a SWOT analysis. You also want to intercept this idea that we've been around for a long time and you're still operating with an old concept of the economy. So you want to do something like your peso. And particularly for family-run businesses, there is a concept called the three-circle model that helps to marry the dynamics of a family-run business, which is where it started from, the succession planning, and is running as a business. And so this is something that you probably want to look at doing in your family-run business, because I do know that that is oftentimes the resistance that family-run businesses often have in bringing a consultant in, because you want that core family legacy aspect of it. So this is one of those models that was designed some time ago to help family-run businesses make that transition. And lastly, I really want you to sit down and properly plan your succession plan and your leadership training for the next generation. You want your business to last? Then give the people you're passing it over to the tools that they need to successfully take your business to the next level. I think that would be it, Andrea.
I think so. I think we've come to the end of episode 3. Too late to pivot, the dilemmas in family-run businesses. We hope that you have found this episode useful. We hope that you are taking away the things that we have said. Go check out the case study that we spoke about in the podcast so that you could familiarize yourself with the concept of what we were talking about. And yeah, basically, hit us up in the comments. Let us know if there are any questions that you'd like us to answer. We could probably answer it in the chat, or who knows, we'll probably do another episode on your question. But do continue to follow us, like and subscribe. We are here every first and third Thursday of the month, every fortnight, where you can get all your information as it pertains to taking your business to that next level. So thank you for joining us. Dana, it was always great as always. And we'll see you guys at the next one.